Christ's words powerfully expressed his love. Those words of blessing that rained down upon them must have been remembered over and over in the days ahead. Words have such a power for good or evil. I wonder what kind of words do we rain down on those we're speaking to in life? And what are those who listen to your words and minds remembering? Are they blessed by what we say? The last time they see us, do they think of a rainfall, of gentle words of love, or something else? That's something that we have to make a choice about. If you turn back with me to 1 Peter chapter 3, that goes to the right. You're in Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1, 2 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1, 2 Thessalonians, 1, 2 Timothy, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews, James. There it is, 1 Peter chapter 3. Okay? In other words, turn to the right and get to chapter 3 of 1 Peter, because I want you to see something in 1 Peter chapter 3. After talking about the basic building blocks of society and the church, Peter talks about marriage and the family. He concluded with an incredible postscript. 1 Peter 3, verses 8 and 9. And I really think that Peter also totally remembered that ascension event, because he uses the same wording when he gives this postscript. It says in 1 Peter 3:8, finally, he says, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Remember Jesus, splanknoi, moved with compassion. He says, be like Jesus. Have this compassion that can be felt. Remember, Jesus was moved. That meant an internal feeling. He had compassion on the lost. And so the lost didn't disgust him. They drew him to compassion and all of the terrible things that they were doing out there. And then he said, love his brothers, Philadelphia, be tenderhearted, be courteous. Verse 9, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, which are spoken curses. You know, a reviling is when someone does something to you and you speak a curse on them and say, same to you, and you know, don't do that. He says, don't whack them back with an equally reviling curse back. But on the contrary, blessing. He said, this is what should come out of your mouth, whether positive things are happening or reviling and cutting and horrible things are happening. What should come out is, on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this. Called to what? Well, called to stand for the Lord even if they revile, called to being all these courteous and kind and all that. But also the most nearest context is knowing that you were called to be a blessing to people. You and I should be a blessing. You know, I have a little custom. I get phone calls now and then from businesses, and there's one that calls me, and this high-powered manager rattles off everything he needs, you know, financially done and all this. And when he gets all done, I say, thank you so much. God bless you. And I remember the first time I did that, he's in Boston, and he paused, and there's kind of a little fumble, and he went, thank you. And now there's a little pause. I think he waits for me to say it every time. He says, bye-bye. And there's this little pause. I say, God bless you. He says, thank you. And here's this person I don't even see personally. It's such a rare thing. We are called, look at this, that you are called to this, to be a blessing, to have compassion, to live as brothers, and to be tenderhearted and courteous. And don't volley back in the great tennis court of life. Don't volley back at people they're reviling and give them a spoken curse, but on the contrary, go through life blessing people. You are called to this, that you may, look at the end of verse 9, inherit a blessing. In the New Testament, a blessing was offered to a loved one, was a prayer of encouragement to them. That's what Jesus was doing. Jesus was blessing them. He's saying, I can just imagine what he was saying. It's just the content of his whole ministry. He's saying that the Spirit of God is going to energize you, and you're going to do my work, and I'm going to be with you the whole time, and I loved you to the end, and I love you now, and I'm going to ever live to make intercession for you. And you know, just out of sight. And the New Testament church picked that up. And specifically, that's an expression of love. Peter basically says that those who love with Christ's power sow words of blessing and reap a harvest of blessing. What a powerful motivation to primarily use our position as a mother to be a blessing. That's what Titus 2 verse 4 says. What are blessings like? Well, remember I said Jesus used his hands? If you want an interesting study, just look blessing up, eulogeo, the Greek word, and look at the context of every blessing. I'll read them to you. I don't want you to get lost. I'll just read them to you. Mark 10:16, Jesus took children up in his arms and put his hands on them and blessed them. Whenever we see Jesus relating to children, think of Sunday school pictures. When you see Jesus and children, what do you see? You see children close to Jesus, sitting on his lap, with his arms around him, his hands on them, blessing them. So mothers, if you want to know what a Christ-like ministry relationship to have to your children, it's to be like Jesus and to bless them and to touch them with your life in a way that's a blessing. Blessing often not only involves touching, it points to the future. In the book of Luke, chapter 2, verse 34, when Simon blessed Joseph and Mary, he said, this child is destined for many, many things. And he goes through about Christ's ministry. Blessing in the Bible often spoke of future great things that were ahead for a believer. Jesus was blessing him and saying, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in me, I'm going to prepare a house for you and in my house, and I'm going to come back and get you. That was part of his blessing, but it pointed to a future and a hope. That's what blessing does. Blessing usually is hard but very rewarding. Jesus said in Luke 6:28, bless those who curse you. Pray for those who spitefully use you. So he never said blessing is easy. And you know what? If you're in a relationship where your children do not particularly think that you are even worthy of their time or attention, or they don't even like to be around, it's the proverbial drop me off a block away so nobody sees me with you kind of mentality. If God says you're supposed to bless those that curse you and despitefully use you, there's a great opportunity as they get out of the car and don't even want to be seen by you to just give them God's blessing. Man, if I can give it to people I don't know in Boston, you can certainly give it to people you do know in Tulsa or wherever you are that are related to you. And if you're married to someone who doesn't particularly love you, wives, you can get an eternal reward every time you bless that person that is less than Christ-like to you. It says in Romans 12:14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Paul says that we should have a habit of blessing as Christ's church. A blessing is an expression of God's love in our hearts. And it is involved with compassion and love and giving and a love that can be felt. It doesn't mean it's received, it can be felt. Even if it's rejected and said, that's foolish, we can still do it. It's interesting, 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 16 tells us that there was a spirit-prompted work of blessing in the early church services. Have you ever noticed that? 1 Corinthians 14:16 says, and this is right in the middle of Paul regulating spiritual gifts. He says, otherwise, if you bless with the Spirit, how will he who occupies the place of the uninformed say amen at the giving of thanks? He's saying, if you are blessing with the Spirit in an unknown language, how can the person that doesn't know what you said be blessed by it? So the context is that people were blessing, and the people that they were blessing didn't understand what they were saying. So you can strip away all the controversy over the spiritual gifts. There is a Spirit-prompted ministry we have in the church of blessing those around us, of speaking in the power of the Spirit words that encourage and show our love. Why should we learn to share a blessing with our families? Because a blessing shared and the whole expression of love that gives helps to those we love and know in a visible way, helps them know we love them. Blessing those we love is a memorable way they can remember and feel and hear our love. This morning, do you ever remember your mother or father telling you out loud in a clear and loving voice that they loved you and that they admired some quality they had seen in your life? Do you ever remember that? If they did it, you remember it. If they didn't, you remember it. That's the challenge we have before us. Are we going to let the Spirit of God energize us, His grace teach us to love with love that can be felt? Those words, if given to us, just stay in our hearts for a lifetime. I think about my own mom and dad. My mom, as long as she lived, just thought I was the greatest thing. I mean, she gave me a Bible when I went off to school. She had a Bible in her bottom drawer that she had bought before I was born. In fact, she bought it in 1948, and I was born in 56. She bought it 8 years before I was born. She said, I knew I was going to have a pastor in this family, and I bought a Bible to give to him when he became a pastor. She never told me that until I left in August of 1975. And out came, when I went off to Bible school, out came this plastic bag-wrapped Thompson Chain Reference Bible in pristine condition. And she said, I bought this in 1948 for you because I always believed I would have a pastor. Boy, my dad still calls me every Sunday night. I mean, wherever I am, my dad calls, and he isn't even here. He said, that was the best sermon. I can't wait to get it on CD. It's the best one I'll ever hear. Today's. He hasn't heard it yet. He tells me in advance, I prayed for you. I love you. And just like that, do you know how powerful that is? I mean, if my battery is going down on my phone, I save just enough juice to talk to my dad. Because I know the power of parents. You have that power, especially mothers